When my son got married, I believed I'd finally see peace in my old age. After my wife, Margaret, passed away, the house had felt like an empty cathedral. I spent my mornings tending the garden she loved, and my evenings sitting by the window, watching the street lights flicker on. When Ethan told me he'd found someone special, my heart warmed in a way it hadn't for years. Her name was Claire. He said she was gentle, refined, and just the kind of woman Mom would have loved. I wanted to believe that. The first time I met her, I noticed how neatly she carried herself. Perfect posture, soft voice, an air of control. She shook my hand like she was making a business deal, not meeting her future father-in-law. Still, I smiled. "Welcome to the family," I told her. She smiled back, thin, polite, but cold around the eyes. For a while, everything seemed fine. They moved into my house after their wedding, just until they could afford a place of their own. I told them they could have the upstairs. I'd stay on the first floor. Ethan insisted it was temporary, and I didn't mind. A house feels less empty when it has laughter echoing through it. But laughter was rare with Claire around. It started with little things. My morning coffee grinder was too noisy. My old radio made the house feel chaotic. And once when I laughed too loudly at a joke from an old friend on the phone, she came downstairs, arms crossed, and said, "Do you mind? I'm trying to meditate." I remember blinking, surprised. "Oh, sorry," I said. "Didn't realize I was disturbing you." She gave me that polite smile again. "It's just this house used to be quiet. I like it that way." Her words stung more than I cared to admit. This house used to be quiet, as if she owned the place. Ethan brushed it off whenever I mention it. "She just likes peace, Dad," he said. "Don't take it personally." I didn't. Not at first. But as weeks turned into months, I found myself shrinking in my own home. I stopped playing my harmonica in the evenings. I turned the TV volume so low I had to read the subtitles. Even the kettle whistle seemed to offend her. Once, during dinner, she sighed dramatically and said, "Do you always have to clink the spoon against your bowl like that?" Ethan laughed awkwardly. I just nodded. Sorry, habit. That night, I sat in the living room after they'd gone upstairs, staring at the silent walls. The air felt heavy, like I was intruding on their peace just by breathing. I told myself she was young, maybe too used to her own space. But something in her tone, the way she'd look at me as if I were a guest overstaying my welcome, began to gnaw at me. One Sunday morning, I overheard her talking on the phone to a friend. "He's nice enough," she said, "just loud. He talks to himself, hums, clatters dishes. I can't wait until we move out." I froze in the hallway. My heart sank. Loud? I thought. That's what I am now. Loud? After that, I started keeping to my room more often. When I'd step into the kitchen, she'd pause whatever she was doing until I left. The silence was her way of claiming territory. Then one afternoon, she said it outright. "David," she began gently, "I think it would be better for everyone if you stayed at your sister's for a while, just until it gets settled. The house feels crowded." I stared at her. "Crowded? It's a 4-bedroom house, Claire." She folded her arms. "It's not about space. It's about energy. You bring too much of it. Too much energy. Too loud. Too present. Too alive," I thought. Ethan didn't defend me. He just stood there, looking embarrassed, mumbling something about needing privacy as a couple. That night, I packed a small bag. I didn't argue, didn't shout. When Claire said, "Thank you for understanding," I simply nodded. As I closed the front door behind me, the house that once echoed with warmth now stood cold and still. I drove to my sister's place on the outskirts of town. She asked me why I was there so suddenly. "Just giving the kids some space," I said, forcing a smile. But inside, a quiet pain brewed, not of anger, but of reflection. I had given them a home, warmth, love. And in return, I was told I was too loud for it. That night, lying in the guest room, I stared at the ceiling and made a silent promise to myself. I would not argue. I would not seek pity. I would let time speak for me, because silence, when used wisely, can be louder than any words. My sister, Helen, lived about 30 minutes away, in a small white house with a wraparound porch and flower beds that always seemed to bloom no matter the season. She was the kind of woman who made you feel at home the moment you stepped in, not through words, but through the scent of fresh bread and the soft hum of her old record player. When I arrived at her door that evening with just one small bag, she didn't ask too many questions. She just looked at me for a moment, then said quietly, "Claire again." I chuckled softly. "You always did read me like an open book." She didn't push further. She just hugged me, and I felt something loosen in my chest, a small piece of the heaviness I'd been carrying. Helen lived alone since her husband passed away years ago, so she was more than happy to have company. "You'll stay here as long as you want," she said. "No one's going to tell you you're too loud here." Her words were half a joke, but they hit a tender spot. I smiled anyway. "Thanks, Helen. I'll try not to disturb your peace." She looked at me sternly. "You are peace, David. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." That night after dinner, I sat on her porch, sipping tea while watching the streetlights blink on, the same way I used to at my own house. The air was calm, the world quiet, but the quiet here didn't sting. It felt earned. I thought about Ethan, my boy, my only son. I remembered him as a child, running through the backyard with muddy shoes, shouting my name, asking me to push him higher on the swing. I remembered how he used to say, "Dad, you're the funniest man in the world." Somewhere along the way, laughter turned into discomfort. Maybe he'd grown tired of my stories, my habit, my noise. Or maybe he was just caught between his love for me and his loyalty to his wife. I didn't blame him. Not entirely. Love can make you blind, or worse, silent. Still, the ache lingered. Days passed quietly at Helen's house. I fixed her squeaky doors, repainted the porch railing, even planted a few herbs in the backyard. She'd often find me humming to myself while working, and instead of asking me to stop, she'd join in with her off-key singing. "See," she said one morning, handing me a glass of lemonade. "This is what a home sounds like. A little noise, a little laughter. That's life." Her words stayed with me. Meanwhile, I heard from Ethan now and then, short calls, quick check-ins. "Hey, Dad, you good? Claire's been busy with work. We'll come by soon." But they never did. Months slipped by. Helen kept me busy, and I began to find small joy in the simplicity of our days. Yet a quiet thought kept tapping at the back of my mind. What was happening back at my house? I hadn't heard much, but a neighbor, Mrs. Williams, gave me updates whenever she ran into me at the grocery store. "Your son and his wife are still there," she said one afternoon, "though I don't see much of them. The house feels lifeless now. I miss hearing your radio in the mornings." That made me smile, bittersweet but warm. And one cold evening in December, Ethan called. His voice was strained, tired. "Dad, I wanted to ask something. Claire and we've been having some problems." I stayed quiet, letting him talk. She's different lately. Distant. She gets irritated easily. Says the house feels empty, heavy. I don't know what to do. I took a deep breath. "Maybe it's too quiet," I said softly. He sighed. "Yeah, maybe." There was silence on the line, a heavy, thoughtful silence. "Dad," he said finally, "I'm sorry for how we handled things. Claire thought she needed space. I went along with it. I shouldn't have." "It's all right," I said. "Sometimes people need silence to hear what matters." After that call, I felt something shift inside me, Not victory, not revenge, but understanding. The silence they had chosen was now turning on them. But I didn't celebrate. I'd learned long ago that true justice doesn't need applause. It simply unfolds when the time is right. Over the next few weeks, I went on with my routine, helping Helen bake, taking morning walks, chatting with neighbors. Life felt calm, unhurried. Then, one morning, as I sat reading the paper, a familiar car pulled into the driveway. Ethan stepped out looking worn, dark circles under his eyes, hair unkempt. He forced a smile. "Hey, Dad," he said, voice low. "Can we talk?" I nodded and gestured for him to sit on the porch. He looked around, breathing in deeply. "Feels good here," he said. "Peaceful." "It's a kind of peace you earn when you stop trying to control it," I said quietly. He nodded, not quite meeting my eyes. "Claire, she's gone to stay with her parents for a while. We had a fight. She said she can't live like this anymore." "Like what?" I asked. He hesitated. "She said the silence drives her crazy. She misses noise, the sounds of life. She even said she misses hearing your old radio." I smiled faintly. Funny how silence teaches us what we took for granted. He rubbed his face. "I think we made a mistake, Dad." I didn't respond immediately. I looked out at the horizon, the sun warming the frost on the grass. "Mistakes are how we learn," I said. "The question is, what do we do after learning?" He didn't answer, but I could tell he understood. As he got up to leave, he said softly, "Claire wants to apologize someday." I just nodded. Someday's a good start. After he left, Helen came outside with 2 mugs of coffee. "He looked lost," she said. "He is," I replied. "But he'll find his way." Sometimes the road to realization is quiet, painfully quiet. That night, I lay awake thinking about how things had changed. Claire had wanted silence. Now she was living in it. But I didn't hate her. I didn't even resent her anymore. In her own way, she'd given me something precious. The reminder that peace is not the absence of sound, but the presence of understanding. And as I drifted off to sleep, I whispered to myself, let her learn from the silence she created. I already have. It had been nearly 7 months since I left my home. The seasons had changed twice, from the crisp chill of autumn to the biting cold of winter, and then to the soft bloom of spring. In that time, I'd grown used to the rhythm of Helen's place. The mornings were simple. Tea, newspaper, a quiet walk to the corner store. Life was slower, gentler, but not for Ethan and Claire. I didn't ask much, yet life has a way of revealing things when you stay silent long enough. Mrs. Williams, my old neighbor, became my unintentional messenger. She'd catch me on my walks and update me in that half-whisper people use when they think they're being discreet. Your son's wife. She's been leaving early for work, coming home late. The house looks dark most nights, she said one day, shaking her head. That girl doesn't smile much anymore. I nodded, pretending not to care, though inside I could feel something shifting, the quiet weight of consequence finding its way home. Ethan called me less often after our last conversation. I didn't mind. Sometimes distance is necessary for realization. But when he did call, his voice carried fatigue I hadn't heard before. Dad, he said one evening, things are strange. Claire doesn't talk much anymore. She walks around the house like she's haunted. Maybe she's hearing her own silence, I replied gently. He sighed. She says she misses the noise, the sound of life. She even mentioned your old harmonica the other day. That made me smile faintly. Funny how quiet can be so loud once you're forced to sit in it. He didn't laugh. I could tell he was hurting. She wanted calm, Dad. Peace. But now she says it feels empty. She says the walls listen too much. I didn't offer comfort. I knew life itself was teaching her something far more valuable than I ever could. Weeks later, I got another call, this time from Helen, who had run into Ethan at the grocery store. He looked thinner, she said, paler, like someone who hasn't slept right in months. He told me they barely speak anymore. Let them be, I told her. The seeds they planted are finally growing. We can't pull them up before they bloom. Helen gave me a sad smile. You always were patient, too patient sometimes. But patience was all I had left. One Sunday morning, my phone rang again. It was Ethan. Dad, he said quietly. Can I come over? Just for a while. Of course, I said. Doors always open. When he arrived, I barely recognized him. His clothes were clean but wrinkled, his eyes tired. His voice carrying the weight of months of unspoken frustration. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at his coffee. Dad, do you ever feel like you're living with a stranger? I looked at him. Sometimes, son. But the harder question is, did we choose that stranger or did we create them? He didn't answer right away. She doesn't laugh anymore. We used to joke, tease each other. Now it's just silence. Even meals are quiet. She eats fast, then disappears into her room. She says she's protecting her peace. I almost smiled. The irony was too perfect. About work, I asked. She's doing fine there, he said, then hesitated. Though I think she's gotten close to her manager. I don't want to believe anything, but she talks about him a lot. Trust, I said softly, is loudest when tested in silence. He rubbed his eyes. I keep wondering if we made a mistake, pushing you away, moving into that house thinking peace would come from quiet. It didn't. It never does, I said. Peace comes from understanding, not muting what bothers us. He nodded slowly, as if my words carried weight he wasn't ready to admit. We sat in silence for a while. The sound of the clock ticking filled the room, rhythmic, patient, almost comforting. After a while, he stood up. I'll go now. Thanks for listening. Always, I said. And remember, son, quiet doesn't heal things that need to be spoken. He left, and I watched him drive away, his car disappearing down the narrow road. I knew this wasn't the end. Life still had lessons to teach him and her. A month later, I got a letter in the mail, handwritten, no return address. But I recognized the neat, careful handwriting immediately, Claire's. I hesitated before opening it. For a few seconds, I simply stared at the envelope, feeling a strange mix of curiosity and serenity. Inside, there was a short note. David, I owe you an apology. I didn't realize what I had until I lost it. The house feels like a tomb now. I walk from room to room, and every sound echoes like a reminder of what I push away. I wanted silence because I thought it meant peace. I didn't understand that peace is found in the presence of kindness, not the absence of sound. I hope you're well. You deserved better than the way I treated you. Claire. I folded the letter and sat quietly for a long time. There was no anger, no satisfaction, only a deep, calm understanding that time had done what words never could. I didn't reply. She didn't ask me to. Sometimes silence between two people is the purest form of closure. Summer arrived slowly. The world around me began to bloom again, flowers, trees, laughter from the neighbors' yards. I started visiting my old house occasionally, just to water the plants in the garden. Ethan had given me a spare key after his last visit, insisting it was still my home too. The first time I walked back through that front door, The air felt strange, still cold, hollow. The warmth that used to wrap around me was gone. The walls were bare, the curtains drawn. The kitchen counter was spotless, too spotless, like no one had cooked or shared a meal there in weeks. I walked to the living room and stood in the spot where my old armchair used to be. The space was empty. My harmonica, once lying on the side table, was gone too. Everything looked perfect and lifeless. That's when Ethan came downstairs, surprised to see me. "Dad," he said softly, "didn't know you were coming. I just wanted to check on the garden," I said. He nodded. "You can stay if you like. Claire moved out last week." I froze. "Moved out?" He nodded again. "We decided to take a break. Maybe for good." I didn't ask for details. I didn't need them. The silence between them had already said enough. That evening, we sat together on the porch, the same porch where I once used to read and hum. Ethan looked tired but lighter, like someone who had finally stopped pretending. He turned to me and said, I used to think your noise filled the house, but now I realize it filled it with life. After you left, everything sounded empty. Even our arguments had more warmth than that silence." I smiled. "You learned the hard way." He nodded. "I did. Claire did too, I think. She called me last night. Said she's staying with her parents, trying to figure things out. I don't know if we'll get back together." "Sometimes people have to lose peace to understand what it really means," I said quietly. He looked down at his hands. "I'm sorry for letting her push you away." "I know you are," I said, "and that's enough." We sat there, watching the sunset paint the sky in soft gold and pink. For the first time in years, the silence between us didn't feel heavy. It felt shared, meaningful. Ethan stayed with me at Helen's for a few days after that. He started joining me on morning walks, helping with small repairs around her house. Slowly, I could see the boy I'd raised returning, patient, grounded, humble. And for the first time in a long while, I thanked life, not for the pain, but for the lesson. Because the truth was simple. I didn't need to raise my voice or demand respect. I only needed to wait. Silence, when used with wisdom, speaks louder than any argument. And Claire, well, she was finally beginning to hear it. The days after Ethan's confession felt oddly peaceful. He stayed with Helen and me for a while, helping in the garden, joining us for dinner, even laughing again, a sound I hadn't heard from him in months. It was a quiet sort of healing, one that didn't come from fixing things, but from accepting them. We never spoke much about Claire. It wasn't avoidance, it was understanding. Some wounds don't need to be discussed to be felt. Still, I knew it was only a matter of time before life circled back to her. It always does. One afternoon, as I sat on the porch reading, Ethan came outside holding his phone. "Dad," he said, hesitating. "It's Claire. She wants to talk to you." I looked up slowly. "To me?" He nodded. "She said it's important." I took the phone, unsure what to expect. Her voice, when it came through, was quieter than I remembered, stripped of its old confidence. "David," she began softly, "I hope this isn't bad time." "No bad time for honesty," I said. She took a shaky breath. "I wanted to apologize again, not just for how I treated you, but for how I treated the idea of peace." I said nothing, letting her continue. "I thought peace meant control, keeping things perfect, neat, quiet. I silenced everything I couldn't control. But silence doesn't heal, isolates." Her voice broke slightly. "I pushed you away because you reminded me of life, movement, sound, warmth, and I didn't know how to live with it. I closed my eyes for a moment." Her words were raw, unguarded. I'm sorry, she whispered again. I know, I said. Life has a way of teaching us, Claire. Sometimes through pain, sometimes through quiet. There was a long pause before she spoke again. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed to say this. Forgiveness doesn't always need to be spoken, I replied. It's often found in how we choose to move forward. She exhaled slowly. Thank you. And that was it. The call ended. No promises, no tears. Just the gentle sound of realization on the other end. I handed the phone back to Ethan, who looked at me curiously. What did she say? She's learning, I said. And that's enough. He nodded, though I could see the conflict in his eyes. That night, as the stars came out, he sat next to me in the yard. Dad, he said quietly. She lost her job last week. The company downsized, and she was let go. I think it broke her spirit. I looked at the darkening sky. Life removes the noise when it wants us to listen. He frowned. You mean? Maybe she needs to hear herself for the first time. Weeks turned into months. Ethan started working on himself, took a job at a local firm, joined a weekend basketball club, even reconnected with a few college friends. He was healing, slowly but surely. Then one morning, he told me something unexpected. Dad, he said, Claire's back in town. She asked if she could see me, not to talk about us, but to apologize face to face. I studied his expression carefully. There wasn't bitterness there, just quiet curiosity. What will you do? I asked. He shrugged lightly. I'll listen. Maybe that's what we both need. I nodded. Listening is how healing begins. 2 days later, he met her at a small cafe near the lake. I didn't go, but when he returned, I could tell something significant had shifted. She's different, he said, his voice calm but heavy. She looked older, not in a bad way, just wiser. She said losing everything, the house, the job, me, made her realize what she'd done. He paused. She asked about you, said she misses hearing you in the kitchen, humming while you made coffee. That made me chuckle softly. She used to hate that. I reminded her, he said, smiling faintly. She said, I know. I was foolish. I leaned back in my chair. So what now? I don't know, he said honestly. We both have growing to do. Maybe we'll never get back together. Maybe we're not supposed to. But for the first time, I don't feel angry anymore. That's how you know you've grown, I said, when peace replaces the need for punishment. He nodded. A few weeks later, I received another letter, this time in a small envelope with no return name, only a small dried lavender sprig attached to the corner. Inside was a note and a folded photograph. David, I've started volunteering at the community center downtown. They host art classes for children. It's noisy, laughter, paint splattering music, and it's the happiest I've felt in years. I thought you'd appreciate that. Thank you for teaching me, even when I didn't deserve it. Claire. The photograph was of her standing in a bright classroom surrounded by smiling kids. Her face looked different, lighter, softer, free. I smiled and placed the photo inside my book, marking a page I'd been reading about forgiveness. Helen found me later that evening and asked, Something good? Something right, I said. Time passed quietly after that. Ethan eventually moved into his own apartment downtown, close enough to visit often, but far enough to live his own life. Helen and I continued our routine, gardening, evening tea, small-town peace. But one autumn morning, as I sat trimming the rose bushes, I saw a familiar car stop at the curb. The door opened, and out stepped Claire. For a moment, time seemed to pause. She stood there uncertainly, holding a small potted plant in her hands. Lavender. "David," she said, voice soft, "I hope this isn't strange. I wanted to give you something." I stood up slowly. "It's not strange at all." She handed me the plant. "It's lavender. For peace," she said with a shy smile. "I thought it might look nice by your garden." I nodded. "Peace is always welcome here." She looked around the yard, her eyes misting slightly. "It's beautiful. I didn't appreciate it when I lived here. I thought silence was peace. I was wrong. Silence is only peaceful when the heart is." I studied her carefully. There was no pretense left in her, no arrogance, no sharp edges. Just humility. "Life teaches us, Claire," I said. "Sometimes softly, sometimes harshly, but always with purpose." She nodded. "I know that now." We stood there quietly for a moment. Then she said, "Ethan told me you forgave me. I wanted to say thank you." "I didn't forgive you for you," I said gently. "I forgave you because holding anger is louder than any noise you ever complained about." She blinked back tears. "You're a better person than I was." "Not better," I said. "Just older. I've had more time to learn." She smiled faintly. "I'm learning too." And with that, she turned to leave. As she walked down the driveway, she stopped once more and looked back. "I'll never forget what you said," she called softly. "Silence isn't peace unless the heart is quiet." I nodded, watching her disappear into the distance. That night, I sat on the porch again. The lavender pot sat beside me, its soft fragrance mixing with the cool evening air. Helen joined me with 2 cups of tea. "She came," Helen said. "I saw her through the window." "She did," I said. Helen smiled knowingly. "And how do you feel?" "Lighter," I said simply, "like a storm has finally passed." We sat there for a long while, neither speaking nor needing to. The world around us hummed, crickets rustling leaves, the faint sound of a radio playing in a neighbor's house. And for the first time in years, that noise felt like music again. From that day forward, I tended to the lavender every morning. It became a small ritual. Water it, touch the petals, breathe in the scent. It reminded me of everything I'd learned about patient silence and the strange way life restores balance without needing our help. One afternoon, Ethan stopped by after work. He noticed the lavender immediately. "She brought that, didn't she?" he asked. "She did," I said. He smiled softly. "It suits you. Peaceful but strong." I looked at him and chuckled. Funny, isn't it? The very thing that once drove her crazy is what she now finds peace in. He nodded. "Life's poetic like that." "Life's just fair," I said. "It may move slowly, but it never forgets." That evening, after Ethan left, I sat alone, watching the fading light over the hills. I thought about everything. The laughter, the pain, the long road to forgiveness. And it hit me then. Revenge had never been my goal. Peace was, but life in its quiet wisdom had found a way to give me both. Claire now lived in silence, not because she was punished, but because she understood, and that understanding was the real justice. Months passed after Ethan and Claire split, and life found its calm rhythm again, not the forced silence of their home, but a real, breathing peace. At 64, I woke each morning with a sense of quiet satisfaction. My coffee no longer tasted bitter. The sound of the radio no longer felt like rebellion. It was just me, living again, not apologizing for existing. My sister, Mary, often told me, "You look younger these days, David. I swear you've lost 10 years since moving here." I smiled. Maybe peace does that to a man. But deep inside, I knew it wasn't just peace. It was balance, the kind of balance that comes when life corrects itself without you forcing it to. Still, I hadn't heard from Ethan in a while. Part of me wanted to call, but I reminded myself, growth doesn't happen under pressure. It happens in space. And Ethan needed that the kind of space where silence teaches louder than lectures. Then one day, he showed up at Mary's house. No warning, no phone call. I was in the garden pruning roses when I heard his voice behind me. Dad. I turned around. He looked tired, not just physically, but emotionally. His eyes carried that dull ache of someone who's been holding back tears for too long. Ethan, I said softly, setting down the shears. Didn't expect you today. He gave a small, broken smile. Yeah, I needed to see you. We sat under the oak tree, the same one that had shaded me through so many of my quiet mornings. He didn't speak for a while. Then finally, he said, I'm sorry, Dad. I looked at him, studying his face. For what? For letting her talk to you like that. For not standing up for you. For believing her when she said you were too much. He swallowed hard. I see it now. She wasn't looking for peace. She was looking for control. And I let her take it. I didn't answer immediately. I just let the moment breathe. Then I said quietly, sometimes, son, people confuse silence with peace and noise with life. You only understand the difference once you lose the warmth that noise brings. He nodded, his eyes glistening. I think I understand that now. We talked for hours that afternoon. He told me everything. How Claire had grown colder over time. How every decision became hers alone. How she couldn't stand even the sound of his music playing in their apartment. She said it was distracting, he explained. So I started using headphones. Then she said my breathing was too loud. I thought she was joking, but she wasn't. He gave a weak laugh, shaking his head. I kept trying to keep her happy, Dad. I lost myself doing it. I placed a hand on his shoulder. That's the danger of loving someone who fears life's sound. They drain the world of its music until even your heartbeat feels wrong to them. He looked at me, eyes soft but full of understanding. You knew, didn't you? I had a feeling, I said, smiling faintly. But I also knew time would teach you better than I ever could. For a long time, we sat in silence, a kind of silence that wasn't empty, but full of healing. A few weeks later, Ethan helped me with the community garden project I'd been managing with Mary. We worked side by side, planting, trimming, laughing. It reminded me of when he was little, how he used to chase butterflies while I fixed a fence. One afternoon, while we were stacking soil bags, he said, Dad, I found a small house near the park. Needs some work, but I'd like us to fix it up together. Maybe make it our project. I looked at him, surprised but touched. That sounds nice, son. He grinned. It's quiet, but not the kind of quiet that hurts. That sentence stayed with me, not the kind of quiet that hurts. Over the next few months, we worked on the house together. He learned to repair walls. I taught him how to sand old wood, how to listen for the right tone when a nail sets into place. Every sound in that house, the hum of drills, the laughter, the crackle of paint cans opening, became a kind of music between us. It wasn't long before word spread around town about our little renovation. People stopped by to watch, to chat, to help. And one morning, Claire showed up. She stood by the gate, wearing sunglasses though it wasn't sunny. I was sweeping the porch when I saw her. David, she said, her voice soft, uncertain. I nodded. Claire, I heard about the house. It's beautiful, she said, her tone polite, restrained. Thank you, I replied calmly. Ethan's been working hard. Her lips twitched. He's here? He's inside. Would you like me to call him? She hesitated, then nodded. Ethan came out, his expression a mixture of surprise and unease. Claire, what are you doing here? I just wanted to see you, she said. To talk. He didn't answer right away. She went on. I've been thinking a lot. Maybe I was too harsh. Maybe I didn't understand what peace really means. Ethan looked down at his hands. You didn't, he said quietly. You wanted silence, not peace. There's a difference. Her eyes shimmered with something. Regret, maybe pride. I know. And now my apartment feels empty. Too quiet. Her voice broke slightly. It's funny. I used to think quiet was what I needed. Now it just echoes. I didn't say anything. I just swept the porch slowly, letting her words fall into the still air like leaves. After a pause, Ethan said gently, We've both learned a lot, Claire. I don't hate you. I just can't go back. She nodded, blinking fast. I understand. Then she turned to me. David, I'm sorry for everything. I thought peace meant control. I was wrong. I met her eyes and gave a small nod. Sometimes silence teaches what words can't. Her lips trembled into a faint smile before she walked away, shoulders small, head bowed. That was the last time I saw her. Weeks later, the house was finally done. Fresh paint, new furniture, blooming garden. Ethan moved in, and I stayed nearby, not in his space, but close enough that the laughter could reach my window again. Every Sunday, he invited me over for dinner. The house was filled with life. The sound of sizzling pans, the creak of old chairs, the hum of soft jazz. Once he laughed and said, Guess you're too loud for this house, too. Huh, Dad? I chuckled. Maybe. But now I know that's a compliment. We both laughed, the easy, natural kind that fills a home, not disturbs it. And every now and then, I'd hear from someone in town that Claire had moved out of her apartment into a smaller place by herself. People said she kept to herself mostly, quiet as ever. One day, I passed by her street while running errands. I slowed the car just enough to see her standing by the window, alone, still. There was no bitterness in me, only a strange kind of pity, because I understood something she didn't. Silence can heal, but it can also haunt. I thought of the day she told me I was too loud for her home, and now, years later, she lived in a house where even the walls must have grown tired of their own stillness. I didn't smile, didn't gloat. I simply whispered to myself, sometimes silence returns to those who demand it, as a lesson, not a gift. Life went on. Ethan thrived. He started his own small construction business, and soon he was hiring workers. Young men who reminded me of him in his early days. He always told them, You'll find peace where there's honesty, not where there's control. And whenever he said it, he'd glance at me with a knowing smile. I spent my evenings writing in a little journal, notes about patience, forgiveness, and how sometimes the loudest justice comes in the quietest form. One night, as I watched the sun sink beyond the horizon, I wrote something that summed up everything I'd learned. I once thought revenge meant proving them wrong, but now I know real revenge is living in peace when they thought they'd broken you. And I meant every word, because the woman who silenced me now lived surrounded by her own silence. And the man she tried to quiet, me, had found a peace that sang louder than any voice. Time has a way of softening the sharpest edges. When you've lived long enough, you start to understand that most battles aren't fought with words or anger. They're fought in silence through patience and through how you choose to live after being wronged. It's been 3 years since everything happened. 3 years since I was told I was too loud. And yet, if you stood outside my home now, you'd probably hear laughter, clinking dishes, and an old man humming to himself while making dinner. That old man is me, and I'm finally home again. I didn't go back to my old house. I didn't need to. The walls there had heard too much of someone else's silence. Instead, I bought a small cottage by the edge of town near the river where Margaret and I used to walk when she was alive. The air there feels cleaner, the evenings quieter, but not the suffocating kind of quiet. It's a peaceful kind, the kind that hums softly like life itself breathing around you. Ethan visits every weekend. Sometimes he brings friends, sometimes just his guitar. We sit on the porch, play music, and talk about simple things, how the tomatoes are growing, what's new in town, what lesson the week has taught us. And every time he laughs, every time he calls out, "Dad, you're singing off key again," I feel a warmth that no revenge could ever bring. Because, truthfully, what I found wasn't revenge. It was restoration. There's something poetic about how life finds balance on its own. The woman who silenced my laughter now lives in the echo of her own choices. She got what she wanted, quiet. But she never realized how empty quiet can feel when it's not filled with love. A neighbor of hers once saw me at the grocery store. She said, "You used to know Claire, right? She's still living alone. Sweet woman, but she never talks much." I just nodded. "Yes," I said. "She likes her peace." But inside, I thought peace is something you build, not something you demand. And that's where she went wrong. There's a difference between silence from peace and silence from emptiness. Peaceful silence feels alive. Empty silence feels like punishment. And I guess she's living with the second kind now. One evening, I was sitting by the river, notebook in hand, writing down small reflections, things I wanted to leave behind for Ethan one day. Not instructions, not regrets, just wisdom. The kind life only teaches when you've stopped trying to teach it. I wrote, "Forgive them, but never forget what their silence taught you. Revenge fade, but peace stays. And peace, real peace, is when you can laugh again without bitterness." I closed the notebook and smiled, watching the water ripple under the setting sun. That's when I heard Ethan's car pull up. "Hey, old man," he called out. "I brought something for you." He came down the path holding a box. Inside was a brand new radio, the same model as the one Claire once said was too noisy. I laughed when I saw it. Didn't think they still made these. "Found it at a vintage shop," he said proudly. "Thought you'd like to hear some real music again." We set it up on the porch, and soon the warm sound of old jazz filled the air. It wasn't just music, it was life coming full circle. Ethan leaned back in his chair, eyes closed, smiling. "Feels like home again, doesn't it?" he said. "It does," I replied softly. "And you know the best part?" "What?" "I don't have to turn it down." He laughed, that deep, honest laugh that used to echo through my halls years ago. And I laughed too, not out of spite, but out of gratitude. Because after everything, the humiliation, the loneliness, the forced silence, I had found something greater than revenge, freedom. Later that night, when Ethan left, I sat outside under the stars. The crickets sang, the radio hummed quietly, and the wind whispered through the trees. And for the first time in years, I realized I wasn't angry anymore, not even a little. Forgiveness had settled into me slowly, not because she deserved it, but because I did. Holding onto resentment only keeps you in the same silence they left you in. Letting go lets the sound of life return. I thought of Claire one last time that night. Not with hate, not even with sadness, just understanding. She was a person who mistook control for peace, silence for strength. Maybe one day, she'd learn that life isn't meant to be quiet. It's meant to be balanced. And when she does, maybe she'll finally hear what she's been missing all along. Before heading inside, I opened my notebook again and added one final page. The lesson I wanted to leave behind. Sometimes silence is the best revenge. Not the silence of surrender, but the silence of strength. The kind that speaks louder than anger, that heals deeper than words, and that lets life bring justice on its own time. I closed the book, placed it on the shelf beside Margaret's picture, and turned off the light. The house wasn't quiet anymore, not in the way Claire once demanded. It was alive, breathing, peaceful, and as I drifted to sleep, the faint sound of the radio playing in the next room, I smiled and whispered to myself, too loud for her home maybe, but just right for mine.